So, to what degree is this threat of violence pushing people, especially the youth, out of Central America and into places like the United States? I discussed this with Sarnata Reynolds. She's the director of a firm which helps organizations and foundations maximize their influence. It's called Strategy for Humanity.
It's definitely one of the drivers. So like you said, El Salvador just took the lead on the highest murder rate in the world after Guatemala and Honduras. And people are leaving that. They're leaving the violence that is created by gangs and organized crime, but they're also leaving the violence that is created by the police and the military that are supposed to be going in and routing out crime, but in fact are often targeting youth, and particularly young men.
So here in the West, especially in the United States, you see this border with Mexico, and you see a reduction there. But actually, it starts much lower than that. It's the entry point into Mexico where you were seeing most of these people rounded up then, right?
Yeah, last year. And then this year it's happening. It's interesting because it doesn't seem to have been a let-up in Mexico, and yet this year there are already double the amount of youth arriving than there were last year. So it looks like this is going to be another record-breaking year like 2014. The Obama administration is preparing better in that they have actually started preparing temporary shelters for kids, detention centers for families. Unfortunately, that has become the Obama administration's policy towards families that are coming up. But likely they won't keep up with the amount of youth because the underlying issues, the violence, the organized crime, and the corrupt officials, unfortunately, haven't gone away.
What happens once they reach the United States? It's not just maybe going into a shelter, it's going through the whole deportation issue, is some of the issues you raised earlier. You know, what if they go back to a violent situation? Talk to me about if I'm one of these kids and somehow I make it into the United States, what is my fate?
So children who are not from Mexico and Canada have to, if they express a fear of being returned to their home country, they are transferred from immigration enforcement to Health and Human Services. So basically they go from an enforcement agency to a welfare agency. That's supposed to happen quickly. It doesn't happen quickly enough. And when they haven't been transferred, they're in detention. They're in a jail-like facility. Once they are transferred, there's supposed to be a legal guardian or parent is supposed to be found, someone trusted. And if that happens, then the child will go with that person. And then they have to go through a removal process or deportation process. The U.S. does not provide children, unaccompanied children, with the right to an attorney. And there are actually organizations that are challenging that. They're saying there's no way that children can have due process without legal representation. I mean, they can't possibly understand what's going on and represent themselves. And unfortunately, last month, a U.S. witness, an immigration judge, said that, yeah, it's hard, but he has taught 3-year-olds immigration law, and he doesn't necessarily think they can't represent themselves. So it's a very, very bad process, obviously fraught with danger. And on top of that, it's not just danger here, the danger multiplies exponentially if they're sent back.
You mentioned this judge, and that of course got a lot of headlines here in the United States, but also getting a lot of headlines is one of the candidates saying he wants to erect a wall because there are murderers and rapists coming into the country, and yet when I talk to you, you're talking about people who have fear of perhaps being murdered or raped. If you were to sit down and try and convey a message to the masses, what would it be? Because it seems like there's a disconnect, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there's a sense that the U.S. border is this sort of wild west where people can come in and do whatever they like, regardless of their background, regardless of whether they're criminals, regardless of whether they're involved in trafficking. Of course, there is some porousness in the border, but it's not these children. These children actually turn themselves in. They actually go and seek out Border Patrol and say that I'm afraid and I can't go back. So, I mean, in general, obviously, to paint an entire population of people south of the United States as a danger is just ridiculous. But on top of that, obviously it's not accurate, but on top of that, there are measures in place. The U.S. border is not porous. It doesn't mean that everyone gets caught, but certainly children do, and then they're put into a system.
Sarnata, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.